can software delivery be accurately predicted? If you sit and you think hard enough, can you estimate it within a reasonable degree of certainty? Well, there's a good deal of research that says no. That even when we try very hard and we think we've understood it all, there is still too much variability, sometimes a factor of 10 up to 100 of variability built into it. And we don't just know this academically, we also know it experientially. Every project I have ever been a part of has been misestimated, and oftentimes we will blame things we didn't know, blockers and impediments and complexities, and then we will assume that was a failure in the estimation, that it didn't account for those unknowns. Well, I have another idea for you. Maybe those unknowns can't be accounted for. That is just the nature of the work. And rather than fighting against it, let's at least admit that and move forward. Software delivery is packed with variability, and it cannot be reliably predicted. Some work can, software delivery can't. So, should we just stop estimating entirely? And if we can't reliably predict it, just march forward? For many use cases, yes. If you have a well-contained work where you don't have lots of dependencies to work out, yes. If you have a product that can set its own dates and can decide when to market things and when to release things and can wait until they're ready, yes. Estimates are doing you no favors. They're not helping you with anything. If, however, you find yourself in a situation where you want to make at least an educated guess about what might be ready in a given quarter, or what we want to focus on next, or if you want to get a feel for, this seems valuable, but maybe it's really expensive. How do I know? Some good reasons maybe to take a stab at estimating. I'll talk about dependencies in a second. So if you are in one of those situations where you want to kind of a ballpark so that you can start maybe planning some of the long tail stuff around buying ads or getting ready to go on a marketing blitz, you've got a couple of options. You could wait until it's done and then start that stuff. That's what I would do if I didn't want to waste any money or time. Or you can get a kind of a feel for, this is probably going to be somewhere around this quarter, this half of the year. Those kinds of things you might have a chance at, as long as you admit you still have variability on either side, you still might not hit that goal. Relative estimation was supposed to help with that. And that is finding a way to give up on precision. We're not going to get this down to hours. Try to use at least something empirical where we can use our past experience and we can start to maybe ballpark things based on that. And it was meant to break some old bad habits about how estimates were treated, where if we're giving you an hour's estimate, you start to trust it too closely. So we're going to try to put some other measures on there so that maybe we can abstract it away and you can realize that software is unpredictable. Please don't count on that date. Of course, we all know that is every good idea gets corrupted as soon as it becomes popular, as relative estimation did. So let's go back to how it's supposed to work. So if you want an idea of when something might be ready if we started it, if you want an idea of how expensive something might be to build, what is supposed to happen is that the development teams, the people that are going to be doing the work, look at that piece of work and they compare it to other pieces of work, either on the existing backlog, which normally works pretty well, or other work they've done in the past. And they say, this is about the same size, accounting for kind of it looks equally complex, maybe just as much mess in there. And because we can say that, we can say it's bigger than this, smaller than this. And you can start to get a feel, at least for the ranking of our guess at complexity. And that then gives the product owner an informed guess. So at least somebody's taken a look at this and gone, I know you thought this was just maybe a quick color change, but as we look at this, we think this is actually way bigger than you thought. It's about the same size as this other thing. You can go, oh, that gives me good information. This is low value then. I thought it was like a quick fix and you could hash it out there and I was going to prioritize it. Never mind. Works really well for that. Also works really well if in your backlog now, you can look and see, okay, here's what my priorities are. Here's what I want to release next quarter, but based on how it's sized and based on our past experience, we can't deliver this much in a quarter. So I should now use that information to make good decisions about maybe pushing out our marketing or our customer communications a little bit longer and hold off on it. So it's giving me feedback and information I can use to make educated guesses. Works really well for that. And when it's treated that way, normally providing those relative estimates is pretty fast because people are not worried about accuracy. They're not worried about getting it down to the nth degree. They're not worried about knowing all the details of the item. They're just worried about giving you a quick gut feeling. Is this bigger than a bread box? Is this tiny? Is this the biggest, most complex thing we don't know anything about? Works great. I encourage you to seek that out and do it. Unfortunately, of course, many people don't treat those as educated guesses, but let's talk about how it should be. My favorite way of doing this at scale. So I'll lay this out. So as a product owner, I was in a situation where I needed to know for my whole prioritized backlog how much was accomplishable in the year. So I had asked the team to estimate the whole thing. And that is not for free. So even though relative estimates are meant to be fast, it's not zero time. So I need to make sure that it was worth it to me to have that information, to ask the teams to set aside time to do that. And I don't always ask for that. There are situations where I don't need the whole thing estimated. Might only need a top bit. There are times when I don't need any estimates at all. But in this case, I felt it was justified to pay the expense of having the team regularly re-estimate. So what we did was something that I really like. It's kind of like a divide search algorithm where we're divide and merge. We took all of the development teams, and there were 6, 7 of them, and we split them up and gave them a chunk of the backlog. So here's 5 items per group, however many divided by however many kind of pairs we had. So we paired off. So 6 development teams, probably 7 on each of them, so like 40 or so people there. We paired them off, and we also spread some subject matter experts we had available to us around the room to answer quick questions about the backlog items. In pairs, they each had a stack that started with like 5 cards, like I said. And on the card was the backlog item. And they could write stuff on the back if they made assumptions, or their job was to take their stack of 5 cards and rank them by size. So with the smallest card on the top, or on the bottom, and the biggest card on the top. And when they were done, they put their hand up. If they saw another team with their hand up, these pairs now came together. And their job was to now merge their lists of 5 into a list of 10. And to do the same thing. So take a look and see, okay, this one slots here, this one goes here. When they finished their 10, they would raise their hand. That group of 4 would merge with another group of 4 to now merge a pile of 20 backlog items together, get the same ranking. And we kept doing this in a large room until on the floor were the last 2 groups ranking every item and getting them all kind of like a backlog snake on the floor, all of the things ranked by size or complexity or whatever they felt was kind of would put it above the others. So now we have a fully ranked backlog by size or complexity. I wanted to do a little bit of math, so I wanted story points assigned to every item, so that it would allow me to look at some history and maybe do some Monte Carlo simulations and get a guess at when we could start planning to release things for the year. So what we did was we started at the bottom with the first card, and we read it out for the whole room. Said, okay, I would like everyone to raise their hand when they feel like I've reached a card that is twice as complex or twice the size of this one. And I said, if you want to do it analog, you can. So you can start with your hand down, and as I get closer to twice the size, raise your hand higher and higher and higher. And when I'm there, and then if I go past it, jump, jump, jump. So I can kind of get a gauge for it. Because remember, we had about 50 people in the room. So we did this, had them go up there, and we'd reach about, and I'd look around the room until we had pretty close to a consensus. I wasn't looking for 100% because I'm not looking for precision. I'm looking for an informed guess. And I would stop when it's about twice the size. Okay, awesome. And we put a little line there. I think I had like a Post-it note, and put that card back. Now we pick up the card that's above that line, read it out to everybody. Said, okay, stop me when we reach something that's about twice as big as this, about twice. And we'd do that. And we kept doing that until we ended up at the top of the backlog where it was quite clear, like there were 6 things there that were gigantic, and we got that. Then I went back and applied Fibonacci, because it works pretty well, to the backlog. So starting with the smallest, got a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5. And even though Fibonacci doesn't double the higher you get, Doubling was still about right conceptually, because at that point, those big items were so full of variability that it didn't greatly matter what number they got. So a 64 worked just as well as we go up the list there. That then gave me, in about 40 minutes, a fully ranked backlog by size with points aligned to everything, and that got us started. So from then on, the team just had to review and see if anything had changed. So is there anything that you would give a higher score to, knowing what you know now? Have we split things and now we need to re-estimate them in order to get that feeling for it? And it was a good, quick way of getting there. I give you that technique because if you're in a situation where you need to relatively estimate and it's costing you a lot, or you find yourself defaulting to hours, I've seen it work several times very well to quickly get a list interranked and then be able to assign scores to it if you need to do some math. So I give you that advice. Here's where I am concerned. Many organizations feel that they need precise estimates in order to manage dependencies. So if I am rolling out a part of a large feature and we must all go together, and I'm delivering a piece and 12 other groups are also delivering a piece, and at some point we need to test together and we need to come back together to make sure we're ready to go, and then we all release at the same time. If I'm assuming that I'm going to do that and I want to synchronize everybody, well, I need to have precise estimates, because otherwise I could end up with group 1 finishing and then group 2's not ready and stuff gets shelved and it ages, and what does group 1 do in the meantime? And I want to plan my big, painful, coordinated testing so I can make sure that I have environments ready for everybody to be able to test all together. And so we push for precise estimates, and then we manage basically our project plan, even if it looks like a burn down, towards that precise date. That is not what this is about. Remember at the beginning, software cannot be accurately predicted, no matter how much we want it to be. So using that technique to manage dependencies doesn't work. We keep trying it, but it doesn't. Everyone knows projects get delayed, someone's not ready, or even worse, we rush to the date and cut corners and don't test, cut out test cycles, write terrible code, rush to the finish, don't automate anything, whatever we need to do to make that date, because we must. So I don't just want to say, hey, don't do that. How do you manage dependencies? Now, what we want to do is build an autonomous organization where people can release, and even though they might have interfaces and dependencies between each other, those dependencies are heavily automated and you don't actually have to go at the same time. That's ideal. Even better with product definition, if you own the whole of things and you have fewer, maybe zero dependencies, and you can release whenever you want. Awesome. Very few organizations can achieve that on day one. So in the meantime, what do you do if not get precise estimates? If you have dependencies, here is what I recommend. Rather than getting these precise estimates, instead, start at the beginning of the project with just the same way you're going to talk about test strategies, talk about dependency strategies. And we need to make sure that you know when people have gone, because you're trying to manage a project. So you need to know what's been released when and when all the switches have been flipped. And then you need to start figuring out how to decouple applications so that they can test and deploy without waiting for everyone else to be done. So that might mean feature toggles, which don't come for free, but allow you to not worry about those dates, and that group can move on to the next thing. You can start looking at service mocking so that people can test against fake versions of each other. And maybe the first thing everyone builds is a fake version of the interface that other people can bounce up against. Maybe it's in a container that they can bring in and test against. Something that then says, hey, this is how we're going to work. We'll code to this, and this will be our test, and you can code to this, and it'll be your test. So that way you don't have to have a test environment with us and wait for a protracted cycle. You can go, and we will guarantee that if it succeeds against this, it will succeed against our real code. Awesome. Those are a couple of technical decoupling techniques. The other thing you can do is firsties. So find the hardest, most complex, messiest part of the whole. What is the thing that has the most risk in it, right? So maybe it's a complicated system. Maybe it's a system people don't like to touch. Maybe the feature is the biggest and the hardest. Have that team start, and they do not raise their hand to have anyone else even consider starting things until they've achieved some kind of a goal. So that's firsties. So you're first to the finish. So that might mean that they've they've finished their feature or they're close enough that they can get a feeling we're within a sprint or two. And then all of the dependent partners can start. That means those dependent partners are not wasting time finishing something early that then ages and needs tested. People can come together. That requires, however, some backlog flexibility and schedule flexibility in those dependent partners. They need to keep some slack so that at any point they can pivot and then pick up that work to be able to deliver that. You can also embrace the Apple strategy of not announcing feature releases until you're pretty sure they're done. Too many organizations have this whole plan and they announce to the business this is going to be delivered in the third quarter, and people get all excited. You don't have to do that. You can wait for a degree of certainty that this is actually worth doing before you get there. Because remember, I haven't mentioned it here because I'm talking very tactical. The point of agility is to change directions fast. So you want to know, as that complex system is building their piece, maybe they get a quarter of the way through and they go, oh, this is not actually possible, or this is more expensive than we thought it was. Or now that we put it in front of people, the feedback they gave us invalidates all of our assumptions. You want that group to learn it fast so then everyone else can pivot. Maybe this work is no longer a priority. Maybe you need to change something about it. We want that flexibility in the system so that we don't end up wasting money on features that are bad, wrong, low value. We want to make sure we're investing our time and energy into things that are likely to succeed and are good, healthy things to do. So, whole pile of estimation stuff in here. If you are doing it wrong, do not fret. You're doing it like much of large organizational culture has told you to do it. However, try to find ways of starting to slip this in, even just in your language. So rather than allowing people to say, when is this due? Or what have you committed to? Start changing language to start reflecting uncertainty. What's our best guess at when this could be done? Start asking people for degrees of certainty. So what's the soonest and what's the worst case latest this will be there? So you start to get ranges and get people comfortable with those kinds of ranges. You can also start being very honest in your retrospectives at the ends of projects if you still have them. So in those postmortems, what caused project delays and how will we learn from this? Not that we should be able to predict all blockers, that's crazy, but what percentage of variability should we start putting on all of our estimates? So if people say 6 months, but we look back at the last 5 projects, and every time they said 6 months, it took anywhere from 7 to 20 months, well, we need to start adding then a degree of uncertainty factor onto that number, like any statistician does. So if that's the data showing that to you. There's little things you can start to do to get people to break the habit of thinking that you can estimate this stuff and starting to get to the point where you can move past it. If you can, as well, technologists, start automating your integration tests. Start figuring out ways to release features even if interface partners aren't ready. You can use versioning, feature toggles. Start figuring out how to create independent releases so that you can go without people. That will give your product owner infinite flexibility for how they prioritize things and stop coupling you to those dreadful big integrated project plans with all the status meetings you have to attend. So this is longer than most videos that I post. It's a subject that keeps coming up and I want to reuse this content. I know it's, as always, I do these extemporaneously. There's no script, there's no plan. So hopefully some of the key points got through and we can start to maybe rethink a little bit how and why we estimate.